Okay, great. So people who are joining this live stream, this is going to be hopefully a quick review of some geo functionality for version 12 of Wolfram Language. Okay, so where should we start here? Let's see.
Yes, I think the main thing is to have a look at the ref pages, and we can discuss the basic structure of these 4 functions.
Okay.
Then I have added a few tentative links in the guide pages.
Okay, so let's take a look at these functions. GeoVector. So
yes, so the main idea of these 4 functions is that they are the parallel of geoposition, geoposition ENU, geoposition XYZ, and geogrid position. And basically what they do is that they are vectors in the frames defined by those position functions.
Right.
And the new thing in these functions with respect to the other ones is that the vectors do not make sense unless you know where they are.
Right.
So that's why we always need to store the location with them. And we use the arrow notation in order to support simultaneously in the same argument this idea of the array goes to array or an array of rules.
What's this one? GeoVector of vec.
Yes, imagine that you have in some place a location arrow geovector. So this is basically prepared for something in the future that we could call a geofield or geodata or something like that, that takes the locations and the vectors separated. So if you have numbers, this vec, and you need to express which type of vector this is, then this is accepted.
I think we shouldn't say the same collection here represents a collection of vectors at respective geolocations. Do we say that? Do we say that for?
I think I've seen that in.
Okay, all right. Represents geovector data. How about something like that? Yep. Whose associated location is. I don't like using context because it reminds me of our contexts.
I see. Yeah.
Geovector. Whose associated location is externally known.
Yeah.
Well, how about does not need to be specified? Does not need to be explicitly specified. Is implicitly specified, has been implicitly specified.
Yeah, I like that better. Does not need is not correct because it really needs.
Okay. By the way, are these needing to be experimental or do they just go defuturized?
No, I don't think we need to experimentalize this.
Okay.
They need some additional work on the documentation to have some diagrams. I think everything is clear. And these will be used in various places. I mean, the GeoVector plotting.
Why do these have to have the same units?
Well, these when we have 3 numbers there, is horizontal modulus, bearing, and vertical component. So the modulus and the vertical component need to have the same. For example, imagine a velocity. So we would have the vertical velocity.
Well, yeah, but no, it's not the same units. They have to have the same physical quantity. Must have units associated with the same physical quantity. It could be miles per hour and feet per second.
Yes, you're right. It's the same physical quantity, exactly. Yeah.
Must correspond to the same physical quantity.
Why don't we say must have compatible units?
Fine. Or no units or no units at all, right?
Yes, but I guess that's a particular case of 2 numbers have compatible units.
Can have units, can have units, but they must be compatible.
Right.
Can be quantities with units. But their units must be compatible.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. It's not quite how we normally say it, but I think it's fine. Display vector. Okay, so let's talk about what this looks like. This extremely ugly object.
I've changed the color to be the slightly darker red of Geo marker.
Okay, by the way, that 160, what the heck is that? That's a bearing in degrees?
Exactly, yes. I can make it return in degrees. It's just that sometimes...
You mean in degree units? Because otherwise it wouldn't be compatible.
Right.
Okay. You know, one of these days there should be an around this.
Yes.
Okay, so then if I say, so you're saying, if I say geo list plot,
if you say
what do I get?
Geographics of that, let's try geographics. So geographics of that vector would just show the area.
Yeah, okay.
Right. But now you can say point or geomarker, and then it plots something.
What happens, I'm sorry, if I'm confused by something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say here, do we have antipode now?
Yeah, geo antipode.
Okay, so those are two geo positions, right?
Yes.
In geolist plot. So now, if those are vectors, what does it do?
Probably geolist plot, nothing for the moment. But if you put them in geographics...
No, I understand, but I'm just suggesting that geolist plot should do something.
I see.
I mean, I think it should make little arrows at those things. Whatever the default behavior is. I mean, that's the default behavior for a geo point, geo position. I think there should be a default behavior for a geo vector.
Probably, yes. Of course, yes. I'm thinking of the relation with GeoVector plot, but GeoVector plot tries to infer a full field for the whole map, like interpolating.
Sure, right. But that's correct. GeoList plot is okay. So there, that did nothing, which is correct.
Exactly. So if you say point, then it will draw a point or your mark.
Right. Okay. And if I say geomarker, I don't know why it cut it off there, but it's a different problem.
Yes, we have a problem. So geographics is looking at the locations, not at the actual size. We need a we need to
fix okay. It. Anyway, separate problem. Okay. But so I think so you're saying geomarker of the geovector. So if I say here, well, you're saying geographics of geomarker of that.
Right. That will draw an arrow, some default arrow.
Okay, that's fine. Seems fine.
And then
now, what's the scale of that arrow?
Exactly. So because the arrow is is a speed, it has no relation whatsoever with the scale of the background.
Indeed.
So what we do, and this is what GeoVector plot does, is just decide some scale based on the number of arrows you have. If you have
Okay.
many arrows, they become a bit smaller. But the important thing is that all the arrows inside the same GeoVector object, they keep their relative norms.
Okay, that seems good.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I take how do I get a geo array of points, array of points, array of geo points?
With random geoposition. Let's see if you have.
Well, I wasn't going to do random, but I could do random geoposition.
Yeah.
Random geo point, random geoposition. Right. Oh, that says it's in some prototype thing. Okay, so let's say random geoposition of Illinois.
Yeah. 100 over there. Doesn't work.
Should it be in system?
Yeah, I think so. It should work.
Okay, so something is goofed up there with the prototype build.
Yeah.
Something is still left over the prototype thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I say wind vector data.
Now this doesn't work, unfortunately.
Why not?
Yes, apparently it's a matter of implementation, but our API is not able to get multiple at the same time.
Okay, so that is another thing to fix.
Yes, so you would have to do thread of that.
Why am I threading? Why aren't I just doing this?
Because normal doesn't act on geoposition. We have discussed this. What's normal of geoposition? It could be several things. So
yeah, okay, all right. So what do I do?
So just mapping as you were doing, but thread of geoposition. So it pushes the head one level deeper. Right. And now this is slow because each call is slow. For example, geomagnetic model data and geogravity model data are able to get many of these points at the same time.
That's totally bizarre.
It failed in one case. Yes, I've reported this to Jason. Why sometimes it reports.
Okay, so now if I do this, now I say, I mean, clearly GeoListPlot should work for this, but it's not going to. So right now I say geographics of GeoMarker.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Try to map them just in case GeoMarker is being confused by so many, by having many.
Well, that's a bit unfortunate. The scale isn't being correctly handled by the arrows.
Yes, there is another issue here, which is that apparently we always place by default the arrows, the center of the arrow at the location rather than.
That's wrong. It should be this. It should be that point of the arrow.
Right. So we have something called placed start, which moves the arrow there. And in Brett's opinion, we should keep our standard so to be compatible with how this works in every other place.
Which is what?
Placing the arrow at the center. So for example, that's why
that's wrong. It's wrong for something which is rooted as a vector. That is, you start at this point and then you blow by the wind that distance. That's how it should work.
Right. I think I do agree with you on this. I'll bring it up to Brett again.
Okay. So, okay, I think the important thing here is GeoListPlot really needs to support GeoVector. Okay. What's proj?
Yes, so GeoGrid vector, like GeoGrid position, has a projection. And it's what happens when you have some arrows, some vectors, and you project them. So, yeah. So, for example, here you start with two arrows, which are one is north pointing and the other one is east pointing, directions 0 and 90. And then.
So, by the way, if you're going to draw these arrows, they better not be centered on New York, right? And they're not in this case. Oh, because you cheated here. Yeah. So there is no doubt about this. These arrows have to have, I mean, look at this case. You can see it has to be the case. You know, it's just crazy to do anything other than that.
Yeah, I find myself having to add this place start in multiple places.
Yeah. Okay, so please let's fix that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So in other words, what it is that GeoMarker and or the default GeoList plot of GeoVector should just do the right thing with these arrows.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so the second argument supports the full language of vector markers, so the darts and various other things.
Okay, I forgot that we had a museum. Okay. Random geoposition we've already talked about, right?
Yes, we have.
Okay. All right. So then the remaining things for us to do here. So I'm good with this stuff. Let's. Are we looking at
Yeah, the final thing is to have a look at the guide pages.
We're being asked, does GeoVector work in spherical geometry? Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
Yes.
That's the trivial. I mean, is there in fact a geo model that is just spherical?
Actually, I have introduced that for this version. I'm calling it spherical Earth.
Maybe we should have one that's called unit sphere.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yes, with radius 1, because spherical Earth is a model of the Earth, a sphere of the proper size.
Right.
We could have one which is just
unit sphere.
Yeah. I'll do that.
Spherical Earth and unit sphere. I mean, arguably, oh yeah, we have this. We just say sphere of radius 1. We just say geomodel arrow 1.
Yeah.
So that makes a sphere.
Yes.
Okay.
You can say geoposition, 1, and that does spherical. In fact, there are some formulas I've coded up exactly, so you get exact formulas.
But hopefully, we're going to have eventually all of these things a spherical position, etc., etc., etc. I mean, that's the plan, right?
I think so. Yes.
But you can do this right now using spherical, using.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, so that has a datum as the second argument. So you can just say, 1, presumably there.
Exactly. Yes.
That's really nice. I didn't know that. We should give some examples of that.
There are some examples probably there with you can say geodistance of geopositions, 2 geopositions, 1 in both, and it will give you the exact.
So you're saying geodistance of geoposition AB 1.
Use numbers. It's always numbers, but use exact numbers.
Why wouldn't it work like this? I mean,
it's just the whole geo framework is very number oriented. And so.
Magnificent. Why is it saying feet there?
Because all geomodels are supposed to be distances. So when we say 1, this is actually being interpreted as 1 meter. And then because we are in the US, it's converting it to feet. That's the ugly factor in front.
I see. But so radius R, in the case of, I mean, that seems very bizarre. Why don't we make radius R when it's just a number, be if it isn't a quantity, just make it be the raw thing, right?
Yes, but for example, in geographics, we say georange goes to 10,000. That's documented to be 10,000 meters. So in many places,
I see.
We have.
Well, that's why we need spherical position, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
We should. I mean, that should not be difficult to add, right? It's basically can just be done completely piggybacking on the geo framework.
Yes, my slight worry there is that this is a slippery road in which we can have multiple types of spherical triangles. All the geometry stuff can be replicated in spherical geometry. So
sure.
When do we stop adding the things that the geometry team is adding?
Well, I think we will want them. Spherical geometry will want. But I don't think we go. I mean, you know, there's a certain corpus of spherical geometry that's been done, and beyond that, nobody cares.
But it's quite large. I mean, all the things that we can do already for ellipsoids, like displacements and various types of angles, etc., they can be done for spherical geometry, of course.
I agree. I think we should implement that so that we just, you know, have a version of this that is the mathematical version without the, you know, without degrees and radians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I really think that's worth doing. I think somebody, you know, I don't think it needs the most sophisticated, you know, I think it's a question of basically, you know, piggybacking on the Geo framework. On the live stream, someone is asking about airplane flights. Yes, no problem. Geo position takes a height. You can absolutely plot that. You can plot satellites if you want to. It'll just work. Coming later is relativistic corrections to distances and things. We don't support that yet, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, by the way, Geo Direction Distortion has obviously been renamed.
Oh, yes. I forgot that one.
Okay, all right, let's do a quick look at these guide pages, if that makes sense, and then we can wrap up, I think. I would think we want to put geodetic vectors and vector frames. Don't we want to put that underneath geopaths and measures? Maybe not, actually.
To me, they are like the counterparts of the positions.
Yeah, okay. Okay, looks great. Okay. By the way, for some reason that didn't give a 12 plus there. You probably want to.
I cannot think.
Right. Don't you want to have your geo in paths and routing? Don't you want to have the things like this geo grid direction difference? Wouldn't that make some sense? Or is that silly? I think that's silly. Never mind.
I think it's a bit too technical for this page.
Right. Great. Where do you discuss putting scales on plots, geo scale bar or whatever it's called? Is that in here? Oh yeah, geo scale bar. Great. And don't forget, geo scale bar obviously has to link to those geo grid unit distance and so on. Make sense?
Yep.
You remember? Yeah.
Yes.
What is it doing? Why is it not finding that?
I don't know. It's in that list. So here I was suggesting to add GeoVector plot and GeoStream plot.
Sure.
Perhaps also in the first section of maps and cartography. The first part is dedicated to geographic visualization, so I think that they fit there quite well.
Yes, I agree. I mean, just as a listing underneath.
Yeah.
What were they? GeoVector plot.
Yes, and GeoStream plot.
Yeah, surely we should have geogravity model data.
Right. That section actually is becoming quite large. So perhaps it can be separated into a part.
Well, here's GeoVector plot, GeoStream plot. You put them in there.
Yes, in this page.
Do you really need to bother to put that here?
Not really. I just wanted to.
I don't think we should put that there.
Okay.
GeoVector.
Not really needed.
I don't think it's really needed here.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't go too wild here. I would just say, sure, geogravity model seems fine to put in here.
Mm-hmm.
Should we just put that in?
Yeah. Gravitational field. Gravitational field.
We don't have it for other planets, do we?
No, we don't.
Got to have that before there's a lunar colony. But we've got a while, I think. Okay. All right. I think we're pretty much done here.
Yeah.
Some comments on the live stream. Let's look at these. Wants to see how to add 3D geovectors, something like this. Add 3D geovectors. Can you add 3D geovectors? What does it even mean? You do geo displacement if you want to add 3D geovectors, right?
Well, GeoVector XYZ is precisely a 3D vector. Yes. So imagine that you have many geovectors on the surface of the Earth, because each one has its own frame. How do you relate them one another?
Yes.
So that's the role of GeoVector XYZ, because it will move them all into the XYZ frame of the Earth. And then you can use 3D graphics.
Yeah, but what about geo displacement? If you do a displacement on a geovector, does it work?
Well, the geo displacement is a displacement on the Earth, and it has to be kilometers or miles, right? GeoVector can be a velocity or an acceleration.
I know, but why doesn't geo displacement move the base point?
It could. I mean,
I think it should, but I think what it should do is move the base point with the vector being parallel transported. Well, is it? It's not parallel. What is it? It's transported by some connection around the Earth.
Right. Yes, I am planning indeed to do this, which is implement parallel transport in geo displacement, and then we can do the standard thing of transporting a vector in around a closed path, and the final vector is not the initial one.
Wow, that's a pretty cool picture.
Mm-hmm.
I wish these borders weren't as fuzzy as they look there. I know fuzziness is being worked on.
Yes, it's a main thing for next version.
Okay, and there was a last question on the live stream. Will Geo Scale Bar update in dynamic geographics?
I think Brett is working on that. Yes, we are aware of that problem.
Very good. Okay, let me commit this stuff. I think we are in good shape here. Okay, thanks.
Thank
And thanks to people on the live stream. Appreciate your comments. See you later.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.